The galaxy had known peace for 10,000 years. 12 great species ruled the stars together. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, and they believed they were the highest form of life in the universe. They had conquered disease. They had ended war among themselves. They traveled between stars as easily as humans once traveled between cities. And they looked down upon humanity with pity and disgust. Earth was a small world on the edge of the galaxy. Humans had only recently discovered how to travel faster than light. They had sent messages to the Concord, asking to join the Great Alliance. 3 times they asked. 3 times the Concord refused. "They are too violent," said the Kalani, an insect-like species known for their wisdom. "They wage war against their own kind. They cannot be trusted." "They are too young," said the Dranathi, beings who lived in the depths of ocean worlds. "Give them another 1,000 years. Perhaps they will mature." "They are dangerous," said High Arbiter Velshan, the leader of the Concord. She was a tall, graceful being with silver skin and 4 arms. "Their history is written in blood. We will not invite wolves into our garden." So humanity remained alone, confined to their small corner of space. The great powers of the galaxy ignored them, confident that these primitive creatures would never amount to anything important. They were wrong. The Vethkai came from beyond the edge of known space. No one knew where they originated. No one knew what they wanted. They simply appeared one day near the border worlds, and they began to consume everything in their path. They were a swarm, billions upon billions of creatures that shared a single mind. They built ships from the bones of dead worlds. They turned captured enemies into more soldiers for their endless army. They adapted to every weapon used against them, growing stronger with each battle. The first species to fall was the Moravan. They were a peaceful people who had never known war. The Vethkai consumed their homeworld in 3 days. 7 billion Moravan died screaming, and the galaxy learned the meaning of fear. The Concord sent its mighty fleet to stop the invasion. Ships that had never fired a weapon in anger flew to meet the enemy. They were confident. They had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Surely they would crush these mindless beasts. The Vethkai destroyed the fleet in less than a day. After that, the Concord tried everything. They sent more ships. They developed new weapons. They built defensive walls around their most important worlds. Nothing worked. The swarm kept coming, kept growing, kept devouring. 3 more species fell in the next 2 years. The artistic Venari, whose songs had once filled the stars. The ancient Korvathi, beings made of living stone who had existed since before recorded history. The gentle Luminari, whose minds could touch the thoughts of others. All of them were consumed. All of them were gone. The remaining 8 species of the Concord huddled in their core worlds, watching the darkness creep closer. Their fleets were broken. Their hope was dying, and High Arbiter Velshan knew that they had only one chance left. She had to go to Earth. The journey took 3 days. Velshan spent most of it preparing what she would say. She had rejected humanity. She had called them primitive and dangerous. Now she had to beg them for help. The shame burned inside her like fire. Her ship landed in a city called Geneva. Thousands of humans gathered to watch. They did not look primitive to Velshan now. They looked hard. They looked strong. They looked like exactly what the galaxy needed. The United Terran Assembly met in a great hall of glass and steel. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in curved rows, all of them staring at the alien who had come to their world. Velshan felt very small under their gaze. She told them everything. She showed them images of the destroyed worlds, the consumed species, the endless swarm that was eating the galaxy. She explained how the Concord had failed, how their weapons were useless, how their hope was gone, and then she did something that no High Arbiter had ever done in the history of the Concord. She knelt. "We were wrong about you," she said, her voice breaking. "We called you primitive because you knew how to fight. We rejected you because you understood war. But now war has come to us, and we do not know how to survive it." Tears fell from her silver eyes. The great hall was completely silent. "I am not here to offer you membership in the Concord. I am here to beg. Please, humanity, please help us. You are our only hope. If you refuse, the galaxy will fall, and the darkness will consume everything. including your Earth. The silence stretched on for a long moment. Velshan kept her head bowed, waiting for rejection. Why would humans help the species that had treated them with such contempt? She would not blame them for saying no. Then she heard footsteps, heavy boots on the marble floor. She looked up and saw a human male walking toward her. He was old with gray hair and a face covered in scars. His uniform was simple and dark, marked with symbols of rank that Velshan did not recognize. His name was Admiral Marcus Chen, commander of the Terran Defense Forces. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars. He had buried friends and enemies alike. He knew what it meant to face impossible odds. He stopped in front of Velshan and offered his hand to help her rise. She took it, surprised by the warmth of his touch. "You rejected us because we were violent," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "You feared what we might do with our anger and our weapons. I understand. Sometimes we fear ourselves." He turned to face the assembly. Every representative was watching him. Every face was hard with determination. "But here is the truth about humanity," Chen continued. "We do not fight because we love war. We fight because we love something more than our own lives. We fight to protect what matters. And right now, what matters is a galaxy full of people who are about to die." He looked back at Velshan. There was no hatred in his eyes, no desire for revenge, only a terrible, beautiful resolve. "Show us where they are," he said. "Show us your enemy, and then stand back and watch what humanity can do when we have something worth fighting for." Velshan felt something strange bloom in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Hope. She had come to Earth expecting to be rejected. Instead, she had found warriors who were willing to die for strangers. She had found a species that transformed hatred into purpose. She had found humanity. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Concord observers arrived on Earth 2 weeks after High Arbiter Velshan's plea. They came to study humanity, to understand what these strange creatures might offer in the war against the Vethkai. What they witnessed in the following months would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Ambassador Torek was a Kalani diplomat with 40 years of experience. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He believed nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. "They are insane," he wrote in his first report to the Concord. "The humans are completely, utterly insane." The nations of Earth had been divided for centuries. They had fought wars over land, resources, religion, and power. Old hatreds ran deep. Old wounds had never healed. The Concord observers expected these divisions to slow humanity's response to the crisis. Instead, the divisions vanished overnight. Countries that had been enemies for generations suddenly became allies. Factories that had been closed for decades roared back to life. Scientists who had worked in secret now shared their knowledge openly. Every human on Earth seemed to understand that their petty conflicts no longer mattered. Something bigger had arrived, something that threatened everyone equally. Ambassador Torek watched as a Russian general shook hands with an American admiral. He saw Chinese engineers working beside Indian scientists. He witnessed African soldiers training alongside European troops. It was as if the entire species had taken a deep breath and decided to become something new. "How is this possible?" Torek asked a human aide. "Your people have been fighting each other for thousands of years. How can you simply stop?" The aide, a young woman named Sarah, smiled at him. It was not a pleasant smile. "Because now we have a real enemy," she said. "Before we fought each other because we had no one else to fight. But the Vethkai, they want to destroy everything. They do not care about our borders or our flags. And that means we can finally stop pretending those things matter." The scale of human industry shocked the Concord observers. Within 3 months, Earth had constructed 500 new warships. Within 6 months, they had developed weapons that the Concord had never imagined. Within a year, they had built an army of 10 million soldiers, each one trained to fight in ways that made the observers feel sick. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was a quiet woman who had spent her life studying biology. When the war began, she turned her knowledge toward destruction. She captured Vethkai specimens and studied them for weeks without sleep. She learned how they communicated, how they reproduced, how they thought. And then she created a disease specifically designed to kill them. The Vethkai adapt to every weapon. she explained to the military commanders. So we must create a weapon that adapts faster than they do. This pathogen will evolve inside their bodies. Every time they develop resistance, it will change. It will hunt them. It will never stop. General Okonkwo was a tall man from Nigeria who had learned warfare in the bloody conflicts of his youth. He studied the Vethkai hive mind and found its weakness. The swarm was strong because it thought as one, but that also meant it was slow to react to unexpected situations. It could not handle chaos. We will give them chaos, Okonkwo said. We will attack from every direction at once. We will be unpredictable. We will be terrifying. We will make them fear us. The Russian engineers built new warships called Grave Crusher dreadnoughts. These massive vessels could descend into a planet's atmosphere and land directly on the surface. They were not elegant, they were not efficient. They were simply brutal, designed to deliver soldiers into the heart of enemy territory and keep them alive long enough to win. Brazilian weapons designers created adaptive ammunition. These bullets and missiles contained tiny machines that learned from each shot. If a Vethkai creature survived one attack, the next attack would be different. The weapons studied their targets and invented new ways to kill them. But the most disturbing development was the volunteer program. Humans began modifying their own bodies for war. They replaced their eyes with sensors that could see in any light. They reinforced their bones with metal. They connected their brains to computers that made them faster and smarter. The process was painful and dangerous. Many volunteers died during the modifications. The line of volunteers never grew shorter. Ambassador Torek requested a meeting with Admiral Chen. He needed to understand what he was seeing. He needed to know why humans were doing this to themselves. Your people are destroying their own bodies, Torek said. They are turning themselves into machines. They are volunteering for procedures that kill 1 in 5. Why? Why would anyone choose this? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. He looked tired. The war preparations had taken a toll on everyone, including him. Because they want to be useful, he finally said. Because they know what is coming. The Vethkai will not show mercy. They will not negotiate. They will simply kill everyone we love unless we stop them. And these volunteers have decided that their individual lives matter less than the survival of everything else. Torek struggled to understand. In conquered society, no one would sacrifice themselves so willingly. Life was precious. It was to be protected, preserved, extended as long as possible. Do you not fear death? He asked. Chen laughed. It was a sad sound. Of course we fear death. We are not stupid, but we fear losing what we love even more. That is what you never understood about us. You called us violent and primitive because we knew how to fight. But fighting was never the point. Protecting was the point. We fight because we love. And when something threatens what we love, we become something else. What do you become? Torek asked. Chen looked at him with eyes that held no anger, no hatred, only a cold and terrible determination. We become the thing that monsters have nightmares about. 6 months after Velshan's plea, the first Terran expeditionary fleet was ready. 500 warships, 2 million soldiers, weapons that had never been tested in real combat. All of it pointed at the enemy that had conquered the galaxy. The Concord observers watched the fleet depart from Earth orbit. Some of them wept. Others prayed to gods they had stopped believing in long ago. Ambassador Torek simply stood at his window and watched the ships disappear into the darkness. He had come to Earth expecting to find savages. Instead, he had found something far more frightening. He had found a species that had spent its entire history preparing for this moment. Every war, every conflict, every drop of blood that humans had spilled against each other, all of it had been practice. All of it had been training. And now at last, humanity had found an enemy worthy of their full attention. Torek whispered a prayer for the Vethkai. They had no idea what was coming for them. Kalanis Prime was a beautiful world of vast forests and ancient cities. For 12,000 years, the Kalani had lived there in peace. They had built towers that touched the clouds. They had written poetry that made other species weep with joy. They had believed that wisdom and patience could solve any problem. Now 3 billion Kalani huddled in underground shelters, listening to the sounds of their world dying above them. The Vethkai world ship hung in the sky like a dark moon. It was a living thing, grown from the bodies of 1 billion consumed creatures. Massive tentacles reached down from its surface, pulling up dirt, water, and anything alive. The harvesting had begun. Within days, Calanus Prime would be nothing but a dead rock. The Concorde fleet had tried to stop it. 40 warships had engaged the enemy. 40 warships had been destroyed in less than an hour. The survivors fled, leaving the Kalani to their fate. There was nothing else they could do. Elder Morath was the leader of Calanus Prime. He was very old, with a shell that had turned white with age. He had lived through times of great joy and great sorrow, but he had never known despair until now. "We must prepare our people for death," he told his advisors. "We must help them find peace in their final hours." His youngest advisor, a female named Chitik, looked at him with trembling eyes. "Is there truly no hope?" Before Morath could answer, alarms began screaming throughout the shelter. Something had entered the system. Something was coming. The first Terran expeditionary fleet did not arrive at the edge of the system like normal ships. They did not slow down as they approached. They did not take time to scan the enemy and plan their attack. Instead, they translated out of faster-than-light travel directly inside the Vethkai formation. Admiral Chen had done the math himself. The transition would create massive turbulence. Ships that exited too close together would be torn apart. Navigators would be blinded for precious seconds. It was a maneuver that no sane species would ever attempt. 37 human ships died in the transition. Their crews knew the risk before they jumped. They had volunteered anyway. But the remaining ships emerged exactly where Chen wanted them, in the middle of the Vethkai swarm, with weapons already firing. The swarm had never experienced anything like this. For millions of years, they had fought enemies who were careful, cautious, and predictable. They had learned to counter every tactic, adapt to every weapon, and crush every resistance. They had never fought humans. Human ships did not fly in neat formations. They scattered like angry insects, attacking from every direction at once. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they rammed enemy vessels. When their engines failed, they overloaded their reactors and exploded. Every human ship was a weapon. Every human pilot was willing to die. The Vethkai hive mind tried to coordinate a response, but it was too slow. By the time it understood what was happening in one sector, the humans had already moved to another. They created chaos wherever they went, and chaos was something the swarm could not handle. Commander Aisha Oyalaran led the assault on the world ship itself. Her dropship punched through the living hull like a knife through skin, carrying 200 Marines in powered armor into the enemy's heart. The inside of the world ship was a nightmare. Walls made of flesh, floors covered in slime, corridors that moved and shifted like the intestines of a giant beast. The air was thick with the smell of death. The Marines pushed forward anyway. They fought for 6 hours, deeper and deeper into the world ship. They lost soldiers with every step. The Vethkai threw everything at them: drones, warriors, creatures that no one had ever seen before. The Marines killed them all and kept moving. "We have located the central cortex," Oyalaran reported through her helmet radio. Her voice was calm despite the blood running down her face. "Preparing to engage." Admiral Chen listened from his command ship. He could see the battle unfolding on his screens. He could see how many Marines had died. He could see that Oyalaran's squad was surrounded, cut off from any possibility of rescue. "Commander," he said quietly, "can you destroy the cortex?" "Yes, Admiral, but we will not be able to extract afterward." There was a long pause. Chen closed his eyes. He had sent so many people to their deaths already. Each one weighed on his soul like a stone. "Understood, Commander. You have permission to proceed." Oyalaran turned to her remaining soldiers. There were only 23 left out of 200. All of them were wounded. All of them were exhausted. And all of them were smiling. "You heard the man," she said. "Let's finish this." They fought their way into the cortex chamber. It was a massive space filled with pulsing organic matter, the brain of the world ship, connected to the hive mind of the entire swarm. Destroying it would kill the world ship and send a shockwave through the Vethkai collective consciousness. The Vethkai understood what was happening. They sent everything they had to stop the Marines. Thousands of drones poured into the chamber. Warriors the size of vehicles charged through the walls. The air itself seemed to scream. Oyelaran's squad held the line. They stood back to back, firing until their weapons melted in their hands. They fought with knives when the guns were gone. They fought with fists when the knives broke. And when there was nothing left to fight with, Commander Oyelaran walked to the center of the cortex and activated her suit's reactor core manually. The explosion vaporized everything within 2 kilometers. On Kalanus Prime, Elder Marath felt the ground shake. He ran to the surface with the other survivors and looked up at the sky. The world ship was burning. Massive chunks of it were falling into the atmosphere, trailing fire like dying stars. "What happened?" Chittik whispered. A human voice crackled over the emergency communications channel. It was Admiral Chen, broadcasting to the entire planet. "People of Kalanus Prime, this is the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. The enemy world ship has been destroyed. Your world is safe. Repeat, your world is safe." Morath felt tears running down his shell. Around him, Kalani were emerging from their shelters, looking up at the sky with wonder and disbelief. "Who are you?" he transmitted back. "Why did you help us?" Chen's response was simple. "Because you needed help. That is all the reason we require." The battle was over. The world ship was dead. 3 billion Kalani would live to see another sunrise. But the cost had been terrible. 41 human ships had been destroyed. 8,000 sailors and marines had died. Commander Aisha Oyelaran and her entire squad were gone forever. That night, Admiral Chen stood alone on the observation deck of his flagship. He held a small photograph in his hand, a picture of his daughter, who was waiting for him back on Earth. He wondered if he would ever see her again. A junior officer approached carefully. "Sir, the Kalani wish to thank you. They want to hold a ceremony in honor of the fallen." Chen put the photograph away and straightened his uniform. He had more battles to fight, more soldiers to send to their deaths, more impossible decisions to make. "Tell them we accept," he said, "and tell them to remember one thing." "What is that, sir?" Chen looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, the Vethkai were regrouping. Somewhere in the darkness, a war was waiting to be won. "Tell them that Commander Oyelaran's last words were not goodbye. They were a promise. She said to tell the enemy that we held the line, and that we are coming for the rest." The officer nodded and hurried away. Chen remained at the window for a long time, watching the stars and thinking about promises. Humanity had made a promise to the galaxy. They would see it through, no matter the cost. The hunt was just beginning. The galaxy expected humanity to rest after the victory at Kalanus Prime. Every civilized species in history had followed the same pattern. Win a battle, consolidate power, build defenses, and wait for the enemy to make the next move. It was the logical thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. Humanity did not do the logical or safe thing. 3 days after the world ship fell, Admiral Chen gathered the fleet commanders for a meeting. The holographic display showed a map of Vethkai territory, a vast region of space filled with consumed worlds and harvesting operations. The swarm was wounded but far from defeated. They would recover, they would adapt, and they would return stronger than before. "We are not going to wait for that," Chen announced. "We are taking the war to them." The Concord observers who had accompanied the fleet were stunned. The Dranathi ambassador, a creature that resembled a giant eel, spoke first. "Admiral, with respect, that is suicide. Your fleet is damaged. Your soldiers are exhausted. The Vethkai home territory is filled with traps and defenses we cannot imagine. You need time to rebuild." Chen shook his head. "Time is exactly what we cannot afford. Every day we wait, the swarm grows stronger. Every day we wait, they consume another world, another species, another billion lives." He pointed at the map. "We hit them now while they are confused. We hit them hard and we do not stop until they are all dead." This was the beginning of the Prometheus Doctrine, humanity's plan to end the Vethkai threat forever. Not through defense, not through negotiation, through complete and total annihilation. For 5 years, the Terran fleets pushed deeper into enemy space. They liberated captured worlds. They destroyed hive ships. They burned planets that had been fully consumed, denying the swarm any chance to recover. It was brutal, relentless, and exhausting. The human soldiers fought in conditions that would have killed any other species. They battled on worlds with toxic atmospheres, wearing suits that leaked poison into their skin. They fought in the crushing gravity of gas giant moons, where every step felt like carrying a mountain. They fought in the cold vacuum of space, sometimes for days at a time, surviving on nothing but determination and hate. General Okonkwo became a legend during these years. His tactics were studied by military academies across the galaxy. He never fought the same way twice. He used asteroids as weapons, crashing them into enemy positions. He hid soldiers inside dead Vethkai ships and waited for the swarm to drag them into their bases. He created fake fleets using nothing but lights and radio signals, drawing enemies into traps while the real attack came from behind. War is not about strength, he told his officers. War is about making your enemy believe something that is not true. The Vethkai think they are the predators. We must teach them that they are prey. Dr. Tanaka's bioweapon proved devastatingly effective. The pathogens spread through the hive mind like fire, killing millions of Vethkai before they could adapt. When they finally developed resistance, the disease evolved and killed millions more. It was an endless cycle of death, and the swarm could not escape it. But the war was not one-sided. Humanity paid a terrible price for every victory. Colony ships were sacrificed to deliver soldiers to impossible battlefields. Entire crews volunteered for missions that had no chance of survival. Families said goodbye, knowing they would never see each other again. An entire generation grew up knowing nothing but war. The Second Fleet was destroyed at the Battle of Hollow Stars. 6,000 sailors died when their commander flew into a trap. The Fourth Fleet lost half its ships during the liberation of Venari space. The Seventh Fleet was surrounded and cut off for 3 months, surviving on emergency rations and recycled air until rescue finally arrived. And still humanity fought. Not for glory, not for conquest, not for revenge. They fought because someone had asked for help, and humanity had answered. Slowly, the other species began to join the war. The Kalani sent their youngest warriors to fight alongside human marines. They were not natural soldiers, but they learned quickly. Their compound eyes could see enemies that humans missed. Their forearms could carry weapons that humans could not lift. The Dranathi offered their navigation expertise. They had lived in the depths of ocean worlds for millions of years and understood how to move through hostile environments. Human ships with Dranathi navigators could travel through nebulae and asteroid fields that would destroy any other vessel. The Korvathi, beings made of living stone, provided manufacturing. Their homeworld had been destroyed, but the survivors built factories on asteroids and produced weapons that combined the best of human and Concord technology. Even the Luminari joined, despite their peaceful nature. Their psychic abilities could not harm the enemy directly, but they could shield human minds from Vethkai mental attacks. They could help wounded soldiers find peace. They could give dying warriors a final moment of connection with their loved ones. For the first time in galactic history, multiple species fought as one army against a common enemy. Old hatreds were forgotten. Old prejudices were abandoned. There was only the war and the shared determination to win it, but victory remained far away. The Vethkai were not a single enemy. They were a species that stretched across thousands of light years, with countless world ships and billions upon billions of soldiers. For every hive that humanity destroyed, 2 more seemed to rise from the darkness. Admiral Chen did not live to see the end. He died in the 7th year of the war, during the assault on a Vethkai staging area called the Screaming Void. His flagship was surrounded by enemy vessels. Rather than surrender, he ordered his crew to abandon ship and flew the vessel directly into the enemy command ship. His last transmission was simple. "Tell my daughter I loved her. Tell the fleet to keep fighting. We are so close now. Do not stop." General Okonkwo took command of the United Forces. He was older now, his hair completely white, his body covered in scars. But his mind was still sharp, and his determination had not weakened. Chen believed we could win this war, he told the commanders. He died believing it. I intend to prove him right. The war continued. On Earth, children grew up hearing stories of the heroes who fought among the stars. They played games where they pretended to be Admiral Chen or Commander Oyalaran. They dreamed of joining the fleet and adding their own names to the list of legends. But the parents who sent their children to war did not see glory. They saw fear and loss and grief. They saw the casualty lists that arrived every week, each one longer than the last. They saw the wounded soldiers who returned home, their bodies broken and their minds haunted by what they had witnessed. By the 10th year of the war, humanity had lost 2 million soldiers. 2 million families had received messages that their loved ones would not be coming home. 2 million empty chairs sat at dinner tables across Earth, and still humanity fought. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The alternative was extinction, not just for humans, but for every species in the galaxy. The Vethkai would consume everything if they were not stopped. Every planet, every star, every dream and hope and memory. Humanity had decided that they would not allow that to happen, no matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice. The final battle was coming. Everyone could feel it. The swarm was retreating, pulling back toward their origin point. They were preparing for a last stand. General Okonkwo gathered the combined fleet, human warships and Kalani cruisers, Indranathi scouts and vessels from a dozen other species. It was the largest armada in galactic history. This is it, he told them. Everything we have suffered, everything we have lost, it all comes down to this. We end the war here, or we die trying. The fleet began its final journey into the darkness. Behind them, a galaxy waited and prayed for salvation. Ahead of them, the enemy waited too. The hunt was almost over. The Hollow was a dying star system at the edge of known space. Its sun was old and red, casting bloody light across fields of asteroids and the remains of ancient worlds. This was where the Vethkai had been born millions of years ago. This was where they had grown from simple organisms into the galaxy-consuming swarm. And this was where they would make their final stand. At the center of the system floated the Queen Nexus world ship. It was larger than any structure the Allied fleet had ever seen, a living mountain of flesh and metal, home to the singular intelligence that controlled every Vethkai in existence. The Queen had lived for millions of years. She had consumed thousands of species. She had never known defeat. Today, she would learn. The combined fleet entered the Hollow with weapons ready. 12 species flew together. Human dreadnoughts beside Kalani cruisers, Dranathi scouts alongside Korvathi carriers. They numbered over 2,000 ships, crewed by soldiers who had already lost everything and had nothing left to fear. General Okonkwo stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the enemy formation on his screens. The Vethkai had gathered every surviving world ship, every hive fleet, every warrior they could produce. They numbered in the billions. They filled the space around the Queen Nexus like a living wall of death. "It appears they know we are coming," said Admiral Yuki Tanaka, who had inherited her mother's scientific genius and applied it to the art of war. Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Good. I want them to see us. I want them to understand what is about to happen." He opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. "Today we end a war that has lasted 10 years and cost millions of lives. Today we honor everyone who died to bring us to this moment. Admiral Chen, Commander Oyalaran, every soldier and sailor and marine who gave everything they had so that we could stand here." His voice was steady despite the weight of what he was saying. "Do not fight for glory. Do not fight for revenge. Fight for the people who cannot fight anymore. Fight for the children who will grow up in peace because of what we do today." He paused and took a deep breath. "And fight for the enemy. Because when this is over, when the last Vethkai is dead, I want them to know that they were defeated by the best the galaxy had to offer. I want them to know that their deaths meant something." The fleet surged forward. The battle lasted 19 days. On the first day, the Allied fleet smashed through the outer defenses. Human ships flew with the same reckless courage they had shown at Kalanus Prime, ramming enemy vessels and sacrificing themselves to create openings for their allies. 300 ships were lost. 300 crews died singing battle hymns and shouting the names of their loved ones. On the 7th day, General Okonkwo's flagship was surrounded by enemy vessels. He had been directing the battle from the front lines, refusing to stay safe in the rear. When his ship's engines failed and his weapons ran dry, he ordered his crew to evacuate. "Sir, we will not leave you," said his first officer. Okonkwo smiled. He was thinking of Chen, who had died the same way years ago. He was thinking of all the soldiers he had sent to their deaths. Now it was his turn. "You will leave because I order it," he said, "and because this fight is not over. Someone must survive to see it through." He flew his crippled ship into the largest enemy vessel and detonated the reactor core. The explosion took out 17 Vethkai ships and opened a path to the Queen Nexus world ship. On the 12th day, Admiral Tanaka deployed her mother's final gift, an enhanced version of the bioweapon that had been killing Vethkai for years. This new strain was designed specifically for the Queen Nexus. It would not just kill the Queen, it would make her feel pain as she died. "For my mother," Tanaka whispered as she launched the weapon. "For everyone." The pathogen worked slowly. The Queen Nexus began to weaken. Her control over the swarm began to fail. Individual Vethkai ships started making mistakes, attacking each other, flying into asteroids. The hive mind was dying, but the Queen was not finished yet. On the 15th day, she gathered her remaining strength and launched a massive counterattack. Thousands of Vethkai warriors boarded Allied vessels, fighting hand-to-hand in corridors and engine rooms. The battle became a brutal struggle for survival. Captain James Whitmore was a 23-year-old Marine from a small town in Canada. He had enlisted the day the war began, lying about his age to join the fight. He had survived a dozen battles and earned a reputation as one of the best soldiers in the fleet. Now he led the assault team assigned to reach the Queen Nexus chamber and finish what the bioweapon had started. His team numbered 50 soldiers when they boarded the world ship. Within 6 hours, that number had dropped to 20. Within 12 hours, only 8 remained. The corridors of the Queen Nexus were filled with horrors, creatures that seemed to be made of nothing but teeth and claws, walls that reached out to grab passing soldiers, floors that dissolved into acid without warning. James lost his last squad member at the entrance to the Queen's chamber. A Vethkai warrior the size of a small vehicle had burst through the wall and killed 5 soldiers before James managed to destroy it. But in the process, his ammunition ran out. His rifle was broken, his armor was cracked and leaking. He entered the Queen's chamber alone. The Queen Nexus was dying. The bioweapon had turned her body into a rotting mess of flesh and poison. But her mind was still alive, still fighting, still sending commands to her swarm. She saw James enter and felt something she had not experienced in millions of years. Fear. "You are the last," she said, her voice echoing directly into his mind. "The last of the warriors who came to destroy me. And you are so small, so weak, so alone." James walked toward her. He had dropped his broken rifle. He had dropped his empty pistol. All he had left was a combat knife that his father had given him before he left Earth. "I am not alone," he said. "I carry everyone who died with me. Every soldier, every sailor, every friend I watched die over the last 10 years. They are all here, and they are all very angry." The Queen tried to kill him. She sent her last defenders to stop him. Drones, warriors, creatures that had no names. James fought them with nothing but his knife in his fists. He was cut. He was stabbed. He was poisoned. He kept fighting. When he finally reached the Queen, his armor was gone. His body was covered in wounds. He could barely stand. But he was still alive. And she was not. He killed her with a knife in his bare hands. He drove the blade into her central nerve cluster and twisted until the light faded from her ancient eyes. And when it was over, he stood in the silence of the dead chamber and wept. Not from relief, not from joy, from grief for everyone who had not lived to see this moment. The war ended. Without the Queen, the Vethkai lost their coordination. Their ships stopped fighting. Their warriors fell into confusion. Within days, the Allied fleet had destroyed the last remnants of the swarm. Within weeks, the cleanup operations were complete. The galaxy was free. The news spread across 1,000 worlds. Species that had hidden in fear emerged to celebrate. Songs were sung, prayers were offered, and everywhere the name of humanity was spoken with reverence and awe. The Concord was reformed as the Galactic Union, with all surviving species as equal members. Humanity was given a seat of honor at every table, their flag displayed in every hall of power. The species that had once called them primitive now called them saviors. Monuments rose on 100 worlds to honor the human dead. Their names were carved into starship hulls and spoken in ceremonies that would continue for 10,000 years. A new saying spread across the galaxy. Never pray for humanity's help, because they will come, and they will save you. But what they become in the saving, that is something the galaxy must learn to bear. Captain James Whitmore refused all honors. He refused promotions, medals, and titles. He did not want to be a legend. He wanted to go home. He returned to Earth and built a small house in the mountains of Montana. He planted a garden. He adopted dogs. He spent his days in silence, trying to forget the things he had done and the people he had lost. Years later, a young Kalani visited him. She was writing a history of the war and wanted to interview the hero who had killed the queen. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why did humanity sacrifice so much for species who had rejected you?" James was old now, with gray hair and hands that shook when he held his coffee cup. He sat on his porch and looked at the mountains and thought about her question for a long time. "Because someone was suffering," he finally said. "And we could help. That is all the reason we ever needed. That is all the reason anyone should need." The Kalani wrote down his words. They would become famous across the galaxy. A simple statement that captured everything humanity was. James watched her leave and then turned back to his garden. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in gold and red. Somewhere out there, the stars were shining on worlds that would never have existed if humanity had not fought for them. He did not feel like a legend. He felt like a tired old man who had done what needed to be done. But perhaps that was what legends really were. Not perfect heroes, not unstoppable warriors, just ordinary people who refused to look away when others needed help. Just humans. And that, in the end, was enough. On the moon of Earth, a memorial stood in eternal silence. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone covered with names, millions of names, every human who had died in the war. At the base of the wall, carved into the stone, were words that would endure for as long as the galaxy remembered. They asked us who we were. We showed them, and the stars still remember.